With everything going on in the United States, something's happening every day. The question is, are they winning? Or is China winning? Or is Russia winning? Hey, well, let's see. I'm always interested to learn more. Let us have a look about what this person has to say from Cyrus Jansen. All right, let's see it.
Well, China has long been preparing for less exposure to the U.S., diversifying in all ways, not just in terms of trading partners, investment, but also currencies and payment system. In fact, the first time around, the Trump tariff wars have set off this complete globalization frenzy among the Chinese companies. 80-something% of them have already implemented going abroad plans.
This is Ke Jin, a Harvard-educated professor from the London School of Economics. She's one of the world's best insiders into the Chinese economy, and in today's video, she lays out the exact reasons why China is entering this next trade war from a position of strength. You see, China is a country that embraces strategic long-term planning, and when Donald Trump launched his first trade war against China back in 2018, the Chinese learned a valuable lesson. Never be too reliant on your main trading partner. Over the past 7 years, China has been strategically growing the key industries which will dominate the future of our world, and Professor Jin explains how this has changed the entire global economy.
In fact,
it's an interesting one. I think I'm not an economist. It sounds fair just on paper to do something like reciprocal tariffs, where you have the same as the other country is doing to you. That's the idea. I get it. But let's hear I mean, China is obviously would feel like it's in a winning position here, considering how much it exports. But yeah, let's see how they would manage
the EV, solar panels, and all these what they call new productive forces. Very little of it is actually going to the U.S., but it's totally pushed them to embrace new opportunities and sign new trade deals and new trading partners. Global trade has actually expanded. China's position in the world as a share of global exports has actually risen compared to before, while U.S. is declining. So I think China's response.
Yeah, I think. What I said before, a lot of people would think, you're an idiot, right? Because if China's exports are being less accepted into the country or in the United States, that would be maybe their argument. It's China produces a lot of what it needs in terms of products. It has so much more to offer within, like internally, rather than the U.S., right? And the U.S. really does need to focus on building internally and focusing on providing things internally by its people, for its people. And it's been losing on that front for a very long time. And that's why I think China stands from a point of strength. But again, like I said, I'm not an economist. So
responses while U.S. is going back, they're going to open up as much as possible. So this is why Premier Li has repeatedly said unilateral opening up, zero tariffs on the least developing countries.
What Ke Jin just said there cannot be understated. All of these new industries China is leading in, electric vehicles, solar panels, high-speed rail, very little of that is actually going to the United States. If you're in the US, just look around. You won't see a single Chinese EV on the road, but in places like Thailand, Australia, and Brazil, Chinese automakers are absolutely dominating the market. Now let's take a look at the top 20 fastest growing economies on Earth. Every single one of them is in the global South. Hotspots like the Middle East, North Africa, Asia Pacific, and Sub-Saharan Africa. Meanwhile, not a single American or European country is on that list.
Yeah, I hate this this list. I'm obviously Western, and I'd like to see the West growing, but this is the truth. You see a lot of developing countries, and if they are becoming strong buyers of Chinese goods, well, China's in a good position if this continues, obviously, right? And why focus on a failing West? I mean, you don't lose the focus entirely, but it's like the game is changing, right? That's the idea. So
many Western economies are stuck at 0 to 3% growth, teetering on the edge of recession. And who is the number one trading partner for every single one of these rising economies? You guessed it, China. China hasn't just dominated the fastest growing regions. It's become the largest trading partner for the majority of the world. That is why China can withstand this tariff war far better than the US. Simply put, China has a plethora of options. But it doesn't stop there. It's not just about who's growing, it's also about who's declining. Western economies are not what they once were. The average American, and European for that matter, simply doesn't have the same disposable income they had decades ago.
We're all broke. Anyone who thinks we're not, just look at it online. Most of us can't pay for anything. It's paycheck to paycheck life for a lot of people in the West. And well, you know, that's a large generalization. Some countries do better than others, but the US, a lot of people are just paycheck to paycheck. And they might make a lot of money in number form, like it sounds like a lot, but a lot of it is being blown away on just cost of living. So to you, it looks like they're rich, but that's not always the case. And it hasn't been improving for a very long time. That's why I look at countries that are growing, you know, where the development is growing, because those are the countries that we might see in the future to be on a stance of the United States or other European countries, perhaps.
And this trend is
shifting global economies. It's something we think we know something about. We know nothing probably, but you see the hints, and that's really all you need to see sometimes.
It's only getting worse. That is going to be a massive problem for Trump because his biggest leverage in this trade war is supposed to be the US consumer market. But what happens when that market isn't as powerful as it used to be? It only leaves the industrial sector, where the US is simply no match for China. Now, don't get me wrong. This trade war will bring short-term pain to both economies, but only one country has the long-term runway to stick the landing. China has been preparing for this moment for years by strengthening trade relationships across the globe. Just last year, China announced it would have 0 tariffs for all developing countries around the world, cementing its position as the trade leader for the global south. Meanwhile, the United States currently has sanctions on more than 1/3 of the global economy, including 60% of all poor countries. If I'm a developing country looking at who to trade with, it's a no-brainer. China is the clear partner. 100%. So today, with the help of Ke Yu-jin, we're breaking down Trump's latest barrage in his trade war, not just against China, but against the entire world. Ready? This is a fascinating case study. But first, let's examine the political landscape the world is currently in. While China has been building bridges and securing trade deals, Trump has been doing the exact opposite, taxing his closest allies. Under his administration, every country or region that has a trade surplus with the United States is now a target.
I think here it's a difficult one because the United States is still acting as if it's in a position of ultimate power, when the power they might assume they have is just not what they used to. And this is the discrepancy between people just not respecting the United States as they might have in the past. I feel like that's the issue. And I've been around, I've heard the opinions of Europeans. You know, I live in the US right now. It's just not, the respect the United States has, unfortunately, is just not that high anymore. And I'm sure that runs into the political game as well. Surely. And this idea of bullying your way around the world is just not as effective at the moment. Even though I understand the basics of, hey, if you're going to tariff me like this, I'll tariff you the same way. Sure, I get it. But is it going to work? That's what matters, right?
Message is clear. If your country sells more goods to the US than the US sells to yours, you have 2 options. Either relocate your industries to the United States or face trade tariffs. No one can predict Trump's next move. Even Canada, who is the United States' closest ally and neighbor, was hit with 25% tariffs before Trump saw the stock market crash and quickly announced a 30-day pause to give time for Canada to negotiate. What Trump will do with the rest of the world has...
I think he's missing that apparently the Trudeau administration actually caved into a few things, but I don't know, man. I don't know the full story on that. Apparently they wanted some more security on the border, something they already promised, but blah, 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 and this and that. It's all politics, man. Stupid games.
Yet to be seen. But one thing is for certain, other countries aren't waiting around to find out. Every major economy is scrambling to diversify and find alternatives to U.S. trade dependence.
We should not underestimate the degree and the pace of fragmentation that is happening, multipolarity, and the rise of economic blocks. We're already seeing the data, whether it's investment or trade, the non-aligned blocks with the aligned blocks and their interaction with each other. If you go around the world, you're asking the likes of Brazil or ASEAN countries, what are they saying? The same thing, diversify. Don't be at the mercy of the dollar or the US financial system.
Did you catch that?
That's what I'm seeing a lot as well, especially with BRICS. They just want to they want to get away from the chokehold of the United States, and if they really succeed, it's trouble for the United States.
Don't be at the mercy of the U.S. financial system. That is the key lesson the world is taking from these tariffs. Earlier this week, Ursula von der Leyen, president of the European Commission sent out a clear message. On China, we will keep de-risking our economies, but there is room to engage and find agreements that could even expand our trade and investment ties, and that could make sense for Europe. To be honest, it's quite the bold statement for Europe to announce. For years, Europe has been at the mercy of the US government and blindly followed any policy the US president presents to them. But once again, Trump has threatened to tariff the entire European Union, which is exactly why we see this pivot back to China and a change in tone to once again being open to expanding trade. Interestingly enough, a growing number of countries, including longtime American allies, are rushing to strike independent trade deals. And as this New York Times article suggests, one response to Trump's tariffs is trade that excludes the US. In just the last 2 months, the EU has finalized 3 new trade deals, one of them being a massive agreement with 4 South American countries to create one of the world's largest trade zones, linking markets with over 850 million people.
Crazy.
And this is where things get really interesting. With the EU now following in BRICS footsteps and actively seeking alternatives to the US-led economic system, the global economy is shifting. The world is increasingly moving towards a decentralized trade network, one that no longer revolves around Washington. While the US falters and the EU scrambles for an economic lifeline, Asia has firmly established itself as the center of global economic growth.
Man, I just cannot avoid seeing that every time I look at this type of stuff. I always see the same path. Always. Southeast Asia, or the ASEAN countries in particular, are setting themselves up for a major win, or overall just doing better. It's I wish the best for them, but it's also just sad to see the West keep stepping over itself, keep falling over itself. We don't know, I personally don't know what will be the end of all this, right? And if the tariffs will end up being good for the West, or specifically the United States in this case. In some way, in a utopian idea, you think it'll be good for everyone, right? But that's just not the case. And some people are falling apart and some people are growing. And it's always this meme, right, where China just has to do nothing and win. It feels like that's another case here.
With China at the helm as the undisputed economic superpower, China now accounts for more than 30% of the world's total manufacturing output. And not only that, China has completely leapfrogged the rest of the world in producing sophisticated electric vehicles, batteries, and solar panels at a scale and cost that no Western country can compete with. One of the fastest growing economic blocs trading these goods is ASEAN, the Southeast Asian powerhouse economies of Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia, and Malaysia, which are pivotal economies, crucial for the future of China's success. The biggest changes in trade can be seen in Asia. Nearly 60% of Asia's trade happens within the region, and half of the world's fastest growing trade corridors are there. In 2023, China's exports to ASEAN nations bypassed those from the United States. And with a majority of these countries either already in BRICS or set to join, these trade relationships are only going to deepen. And it's not just Southeast Asia. Looking west, the Persian Gulf nations, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and others have also begun prioritizing their relationships with China and India. Why? Energy. Asia now accounts for over 70% of total oil and gas exports from the Gulf. This energy trade, combined with the region's critical position along the new Silk Road connecting China to Europe, has turned the Middle East into one of the biggest beneficiaries of this new global economic order. Everyone, the global landscape is quickly changing, and with an unpredictable Donald Trump leading the United States for the next 4 years, we honestly can't predict all the changes we are going to see to our global economy. I look forward to seeing you all in our next video soon.
Thank you, sir. The thing is, the market hates uncertainty. It doesn't like it. It doesn't know what's going to happen, what's the next thing that's going to come out of Trump's mouth, or the change, good or bad. And yeah, markets don't like that. Subscribe to this amazing individual, Cyrus Jansen, or Jensen, if he's Scandinavian, I'm not sure. Let's read some of the comments. If you had any doubts, China world leader in 37 of 44 critical technologies. The study, funded by the United States Department. Oh, okay, that's a lot. Let's see, there must be an AI as well, a bunch of things here. Even with the tariffs on China that Trump levied last week, Chinese goods are still about 25% the cost of American goods. That margin isn't going to be fixed by tariffs. That's a big thing. Chinese goods are simply way cheaper. Let's see what he said. If there's anything, I mean, well, it's hard to beat, right? It's the simple idea. Look, if I offer you something for 20 bucks and the next person next to me offers you the exact same thing for 5 bucks or 10 bucks, I mean, what are you going to do? Even for 18 bucks. If they make it easy enough, you're going to take anything that's cheaper, or the average person will. And the only argument against it is American made, right? So if mine is American made and that's Chinese, then if the margin is small enough, they might just purchase from me. China's thinking 5 to 15 years down the road. The USA is thinking one cable news cycle into the future. I don't know, man. China has the greatest manufacturing capacity. I agree. US, or one of the greatest, I don't know if it is the greatest. The US has the greatest national debt. It has a massive national debt, and let's see if they can work on that. You see, this is the thing. Don't be at the mercy of the dollar. A lesson learned for China and the rest of the developing world. I think that's the most important one. I think they're tired of being pushed around. So imagine you're the US or you're China, and the US has been world power in terms of its finance as well, the dollar currency. And suddenly, for the last whatever amount of time, decades or years, it's just not doing as well. And it's unpredictable. It's going down the drain. They're making mistakes. The debt is increasing. And you're thinking, hey, I need to protect myself. How can I keep supporting this dollar in this way? It's just, it's just not like, it's almost, you know what? Before I ramble on, because it's such an annoying topic in some sense, how much the US is in debt, and so is many countries in Europe, including Italy, France, and all these things. What do you think? What do we do? What does the West do to stay alive here? It obviously won't be what you call a V reversal out of complete degradation, but perhaps there are some things that can be done. And I know a lot of people are like, use force in some sense. And I don't mean not necessarily militarily, but it's always a lot of people who voted for Trump, and probably this is a minority perhaps, that just think, they'll learn. Once we get it rolling, they'll learn. They'll get in line. And this rhetoric just won't work forever. At the end, people won't get in line, and the US suddenly won't have the influence to do anything about it. I wish the best for the US and Europe. These are my places. So let's see what game happens. Let me know what you think. Is China ahead of the US, or is the US ahead?